What if one day you had memories that were not yours, or you craved food that you don't even like? Is it possible to carry a piece of someone else's soul inside your body? Let's get into it. Jack was born absolutely loving the water. He loved to swim, and he had a whole bunch of energy. So he was always begging his parents to either take him swimming or take him to the park, somewhere other than the house. And he didn't care when he went swimming if he was swimming in the local lake, in a swimming pool, maybe in his own bathtub. He was just born with boundless energy and a love for anything that had water. And then one day, Jack, without warning, he wasn't able to get out of bed. He was having a difficulty getting out of bed. Just moving across to make that movement just completely exhausted him, which was not, characteristic of Jack. He always had a ton of energy. So at first his parents thought, you know what? He probably just has a cold or something like that. His parents would quickly discover that something other than a cold was really wrong with their son. And at the age of 9, he was diagnosed with a severe heart condition that would leave him weak and confined indoors, most often to his bed. In order to survive, Jack would need a new heart, and this would change his life forever. But to understand Jack's story, you need to meet Emily. Now, 3-year-old Emily, she also loved the water. Every time she got near water, she would start laughing. She would run in, even if she saw a puddle, and she loved to wade in her family's pool. However, one day, Emily managed to slip unnoticed into the backyard pool. And despite the immediate rush to rescue and resuscitate her, unfortunately, she did not survive. As you can imagine, the grief that her family was feeling. However, they decided, despite that grief, to donate Emily's organs. They had hoped that they would be able to give life to someone else and add meaning to the loss that they were feeling. Jack would be the recipient of Emily's heart. And the day that heart became available, it was a swirl of emotions happening for both families. So for Emily's family, it was a bittersweet moment of letting go, but they were trying to find comfort in knowing that her spirit would live on in someone else. For Jack's family, it was very tense, but a really hopeful experience as they were watching him being wheeled into the surgery, because they were placing all their hopes on the success of this operation, because sometimes those operations aren't successful. In this case, the surgery was a success, and initially, Jack's recovery seemed absolutely miraculous. Immediately, he regained his strength, he had vitality, but he also gained something else. He had an intense fear of water. So intense, in fact, he would not even go near water fountains, much less think about swimming. Now, as you can imagine, at first, his parents, they were confused because, he'd always been a fish in the water before the surgery. And they thought maybe this was just something post-surgery, and it would eventually go away. But as the weeks passed, Jack also began to do other unusual things, such as express feelings of sadness and fear. And his parents, those were not characteristic of Jack before the surgery. He also told them about nightmares he was having, a particular nightmare where he was being submerged underwater and unable to breathe. Now, his parents were curious because all of these behaviors happened post-surgery. So through some investigation, they were able to learn about the tragic circumstances of his heart donor's death. When they learned this, they just looked at each other and they weren't really able to process what they had just learned because they had no idea what to make of what was happening to their son. I mean, on one hand, he was alive thanks to the organ transplant. On the other hand, they could see that their son was carrying emotional memories that did not seem to be his own. Because you need to remember, Jack had no knowledge about Emily, the girl whose heart he received. He didn't know about how she had, what had happened in the pool. They ended up taking their son to see a pediatric psychiatrist in the hopes that he would return to the son they knew before the surgery. But unfortunately, he never recovered his love of water. And that takes us to another story. Tim. Now, Tim's friends would describe him as being assertive, independent. He had a love for beer and chicken nuggets. He also had a love for his motorcycle, about as much as he loved beer and chicken nuggets. And then one day, when he was just 18, he got into an accident on that particular motorcycle. When he was rushed to the hospital, it was immediately apparent that, unfortunately, he would not survive that accident. However, they also discovered he was an organ donor. And so the call was made to his match, Claire. Now, that call would not only give her a second chance at life, but it would change everything about her. Claire suffered from a really rare disease that had caused both her heart and lungs to fail. And she was not going to live unless she received a heart and lung transplant. Claire lived in New England, and she would make history as the first woman in the region to receive a double transplant, which would be the heart and lung. The surgery was a success, and it marked a really new chapter in her life, not only medically, but personally. She had a new lease on life, and her recovery was also remarkable. But it also came with some unexpected changes that went beyond the physical healing. Now, before the surgery, Claire's friends or anyone who knew her would describe her as more of an introvert. She was very kind, and she would be the person in the room that most people would not even know was in the room. Now, shortly after the surgery, Claire began to experience some really strange things. And the first thing she experienced was cravings for specific food that she'd never enjoyed before, beer and chicken nuggets. Now, the sudden change, it was confusing, but also kind of funny to her and her family. She didn't think much of it. What she did think a lot of was this recurring dream that she kept having after her surgery. She was dreaming of this man who felt strangely familiar yet unknown, and his name was Tim. Now remember, you are not told any information about your organ donor. This helps protect the privacy of all people concerned. She was driven to find out as much information as she could because the vividness of her dreams just wouldn't leave. So she embarked on this journey to learn as much as she could about her donor. Now, after some investigation, she did discover that her heart and lungs had come from Tim, who had died in that motorcycle accident. Tim had also been fond of beer and chicken nuggets, those same cravings that Claire had suddenly developed post-surgery. It was just too precise to be coincidental. So as Claire was adjusting to her new life post-transplant, she also was noticing more than just these cravings and more than just the dreams she was having. Her personality was shifting because she found herself becoming more assertive, becoming more independent. Those are traits she learned that were characteristic of Tim. Now, these changes were very confusing to her, and she was grappling with this sort of blurred line between her own identity and that of her donor. How could Claire know these details? Could it be that Tim left behind more than just his organs? But then that would lead us to one of the strangest stories. In 1995, Sonny, 57 at the time, had just been told that he only had 6 months at best to live. He had been suffering from congestive heart failure, and his heart was failing, and the only way that he was going to survive was if he was going to receive a new heart. Time was just simply running out for Sonny. But this would not be the end of Sonny's story by far. And normally when you're put on those lists, the wait is much longer than 6 months. But to understand Sonny's story, let's learn a little bit about Terry. Terry, by all accounts, lived a seemingly normal life. He had a wife, he had some kids, he went to work, he paid his bills, and he really just tried to live the best life that he could. However, he was also suffering from a lot of other issues, and at the age of 33, he would take his own life. And in that moment, Sonny's future would drastically change. His heart was transplanted into Sonny, so that gave Sonny a new lease on life. But this story doesn't end with the miracle of survival, because it's going to get much stranger than that. After his surgery, Sonny didn't know who donated his heart. That information, as I told you, is generally kept confidential. He just knew that it came from a 33-year-old South Carolina man. He was driven. It was like he just had to know who this person was. So in November of 1996, he sent a letter to the South Carolina Organ Procurement Agency, and this letter would be forwarded to the donor's family. And he just wanted to thank them for their generous donation that saved his life. And he also asked to meet them. So a month later, he heard back from Cheryl, who was the organ donor's wife, and she sent photos and some information about her family, but she didn't leave a phone number, and there wasn't one listed. Sonny could not leave it there. Again, he was driven. He had to meet her. So he sent another letter to the agency, and this time it included his phone number. And guess what? She called him. And on January 19th, 1997, they actually met and they went to dinner. Now, Sonny later would recall this meeting as saying, I just could not keep my eyes off of her. It felt like I had known her for years. Now, keep in mind, Sonny at this point was also married to someone else, and he had his own children. And yet here he was feeling an irresistible attraction to Cheryl. He couldn't explain it. He didn't know why. He just felt obsessed that he had to find her. And once he met her, it was like he understood why he had to find her. And even Cheryl would say, although she was still grieving, that meeting Sonny made it easier for her, knowing that something good came from something so bad. And 4 months after the two met, they actually began dating on a regular basis. And in 2001, he bought her and her children a home closer to him. And in 2004, they married. So this seemed like a second chance for both of them. Sonny was living thanks to Terry's heart that was beating in his chest, until it wasn't. Because in 2008, Sonny would take his life in the exact same manner that Terry did before him. Now, this eerie parallel left friends and family questioning whether something more than just a heart had been passed on to Sonny, because remember, Sonny was obsessed with finding Cheryl. He had to find. He just had to do it. And when he met her, it was like his destiny was already carved out for him. Now, this was not Sonny pre-surgery. This was post. Now, these stories raise really compelling questions about the essence of who we are. How much of our essence is contained within our organs? Is it that our identity is tied solely to our minds, or do our bodies and perhaps the experience, the history of them that's contained within them also define us? So what's really happening here? And I will tell you that these are not isolated cases. Many transplant recipients have reported changes in personality, changes in food preferences, and then they'll have behaviors that they never had before the surgery. Doctors call it the cellular memory phenomena. Now, this is the idea that memories or emotions can be stored in cells outside of your brain. So that would be places like your heart, your liver, your kidneys. Now, I will tell you that the scientific community remains a bit skeptical. The precision of the experiences that people are reporting and the connection to the donor's life can't really be explained by this theory of cellular memory. Are they just coincidences? Or is there something more, something deeply mysterious that connects us in ways that we can't fully understand? Because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of stories, just like the ones I told you today. Life is a series of miracles. Some we can see, and some happen inside of us in ways that we may never understand. Thank you for joining me on this fascinating journey into the unknown. If you have any thoughts about this, or if you've heard similar stories, I'd love for you to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that blur the lines between science, spirituality, and the miraculous. Until next time, remember, miracles are all around us, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. This is Isabella, signing out.